Hey, Fidelity. What's it cost to invest with the Fidelity app?
Start with as little as $1 with no account fees or trade commissions on U.S. stocks and ETFs.
That's music to my ears.
I can only talk.
Investing involves risk, including risk of loss. Zero account fees apply to retail brokerage accounts only. Sell order assessment fee not included. A limited number of ETFs are subject to a transaction-based service fee of $100. See full list at fidelity.com/commissions. Fidelity Brokerage Services, LLC, member NYSE, SIPC.
As a contractor, I don't pay for materials I don't use. So why would I pay for stuff I don't need in my mobile plan? That's why the new MyBiz plan from Verizon Business is so perfect. Now I can choose exactly what I want, and I only pay for what I need.
Right now, with MyBiz plan, get our best price, as low as $25 a line. Visit verizon.com/business to get started today. Price per month with 5+ lines. Includes autopay and paper-free billing and special intro offer discounts. Taxes, fees, economic adjustment charge, and terms apply. Offers end June 10th, 2025.
Hello and welcome to Fintech Insider Insights. I'm David Barton-Grimley here at 11FS. Today, we are diving into a topic that only seems to come up when things go wrong in banking: outages. As banks become increasingly digital, if an app goes down, it can feel like the whole bank has gone down. Services stop, businesses are disrupted, customers get frustrated, and yet the typical response is a generic status page with an equally impersonal message. Back in February 2025, several major UK banks experienced outages over payday, affecting millions of customers who were unable to access their accounts. In the same month, our friends at Monzo published a blog post that caught our attention. They introduced us to Monzo Stand In, an ingenious solution that ensures customers can still access critical banking services even when the worst happens. So, being nerds, we found it super interesting, which is why I'm delighted to say that today I'm joined by Matej Pfajfar, Chief Technology Officer at Monzo Bank, to tell us more about how it all works. So, Matej, thanks so much for joining us. How have you been today?
Very good. Thank you. Lovely to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So before we start, tell us a little bit about yourself.
What can I tell you? I'm an engineer by profession and by heart, I should say, for more years than I care to remember. I joined Monzo in early 23 from another company I really love working at, which was Google. I helped build Google's mobile operating system, Android. And then three things happened when Monzo got in touch. One, I signed up for the account and I tried it and I thought, wow, this is different. This company has serious product muscle. Loved it. I read the Eng blog that you referenced. It's got lots of cool stuff about Eng policies and in how we build things, how we think about technology, which I loved. I met about 10 people from Monzo and I signed the contract shortly thereafter.
Oh, that's amazing.
And, so very proud to be here and yeah.
Yeah, so you're a fan. That's cool.
Absolutely.
So going into the topic a little bit, I'd like to start about the size of the problem to begin with. So our listeners have kind of a varying degree of technical understanding. Can you help us by explaining something really foundational? So when we say outage in the context of banking, what do we mean?
It's a very good question. So I think it's probably worth defining two terms that we use often, and they're different but related: an outage and an incident. Mm-hmm. So we typically talk of an outage when you have a systemic failure to provide a certain service to customers. Now, these can be full outages, in the sense that all customers are affected. They could be partial in the sense that only a proportion of customers are affected. They could be full in the sense that every major service has gone down, or they could be partial in the sense that, you could withdraw cash, but you can't necessarily file an insurance claim. So that's an outage. Before you see an outage, what you typically see are incidents. So incidents are, broadly speaking, so it's any type of an anomalous condition in the system that you detect, and you have to react to it in a timely manner. Now, most incidents, and things happen from time to time, most incidents don't result in an outage, but the bigger the incident and the longer you can't respond to it effectively, the more likely it is that you will have an outage that customers will notice.
Interesting. So it could have like a cascading effect if you don't get on top of
Correct.
it pretty quickly. And would you say over time, over the last 5-10 years, as mobile adoption has increased and you have mobile-centric banks such as Monzo, for example, that outages are increasing, or incidences and outages are somehow increasing over time. It feels that way in 2025 with the two big ones we had this year. Or is that not the case?
You're correct in that it feels like, this last 12 months were maybe worse than the previous 12 months, given some of the large outages we've had in the system. And we have to say, when an outage happens in any bank, obviously that's us banks not meeting the bar and the level of service that we want to provide, right? Certainly if it's a large, prolonged outage.
Yeah.
If it's getting worse across the industry, I don't have any data that tells me whether it is or isn't. It's been improving at Monzo. To give you some numbers, if I look at availability of some of our important business services like payments, we typically express this in sort of number of nines. And over the last 12 months, we've been at 4 nines and a half. This means that in the full year, we've experienced a total of about 20 minutes of downtime.
Wow.
In payments. So I think that's about like a few seconds a day on average.
Wow, that's incredible. And maintaining that degree of uptime sounds like an almost constant, almost like a full-time job, right? It's not something that, you just develop and ship and leave and come back and fix the problem, right? Like how that must introduce all sorts of challenges to running an app.
It's definitely one of our top priorities. People often ask me, Matej, tell us about what keeps the CTO up at night.
Yeah.
And, and the top two things are always the same. Number one, keep the bank up and running, keep providing service to customers. Number two, keep the bank and the customer secure from criminals. Those are always the top two.
Yeah.
And you're right. It's an ongoing process. It's not a done and dusted. We work on this every day. Teams today are on call, 24/7, responding when things happen and try and make sure that the bank keeps up and running.
Yeah. And would you say, how does that risk compare to some other industries? As we're recording today, we had a massive power outage across like the Iberian Peninsula, right? And, both of those countries, Portugal and Spain, had all sorts of problems. So you've got like utility outages, which are seen as kind of really material to people's lives. And I was actually just talking to a colleague of mine who works in Barcelona, and he was saying, yeah, but I can't make any payments because the apps are down, the mobile networks. Does it feel like that kind of systemic issue to you in keeping the app up?
Absolutely. It all depends, on what service is impacted and what it means for the actual customers. Remember, in the end, the people who have issues and challenges, if you have an outage, is the customers. And that's true of any industry. For example, if let's say your favorite messaging service goes down, you can't get in touch with mom, that could be bad. But if your alternate messaging service work, then it's something that you can tolerate for a bit. If your favorite streaming service goes down during a big match, yes, that is a massive annoyance, but it's probably not critical. The type of services that we banks provide, obviously, are in the more critical range. For example, if you're buying a property and you have to pay your deposit, that has to happen on the day.
Yeah.
If you're just about to catch the last train home, you have to buy a train ticket. The payment better work, or you're stranded. So when those things fail, there's a larger impact on customers.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I think banks are not the only industry, clearly, where the consequences of outages are serious and severe, but they're right up there at the top, I think.
Yeah, they're very important. And would you say, maybe not just Monzo, but the entire industry, is there a particular type of outage or incident that you've seen increasing in frequency over time, for example?
I don't think we see, any patterns. It's important to know that in these complex systems, and we can talk more about that later on if you wish, is you have very many moving parts and, things do go wrong. Hardware fails, power outages happen, etc. So you can't prevent these things from happening. The name of the game is to detect them quickly and respond and build systems in a way whereby the customers don't notice when some things don't go quite as expected.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. Well, before we find out more about what Monzo has been doing to solve this particular problem, we are just going to take a quick break, so don't go anywhere.
Whatever the occasion, effortless elegance is right this way. Because Hilton brings you new ways to stay courtesy of the Nomad London. And it doesn't stop at award-winning dining in a space draped in velvet and illuminated by vintage chandeliers. No, this day goes beyond with unparalleled personalized service and attentive hospitality. Oh, and did we mention the Nomad London can be booked using your Hilton Honors points at Hilton.com? Hilton, for the stay.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alica Bank who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.
Welcome back to Fintech Insider Insights, where I'm in conversation with the CTO of Monzo Bank, Matej Pfajfar. Before the break, we were examining the state of banking app outages and the impact they have on the finance industry as a whole. But now we're going to take a look at what Monzo has been building to change that story. So let's talk about Monzo Stand In. Matej, what is it?
That's a very good question, and it's one of my favorite topics to talk about. I think perhaps I could speak to this in 3 parts. I think it'd be good to understand what the primary platform does, and how it works, and also how it fails and how we prevent against that. Then let's talk about what Monzo Stand In does and why it actually exists in the first place. And then I hope we have some time. I want to tell you about some cool things about Monzo Stand In.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the primary platform. So this is the platform that serves the majority of traffic 24/7. Think of this as several thousand individually simple, loosely connected components working together to service customers, execute payments, detect fraud, generate statements, etc., issue your weekly Greg's coupon, all of that stuff. Those things run in data centers, usually multiple locations, and so lots of moving parts, and occasionally things go wrong. For example, server hard drives will intermittently fail, right? Power outages will happen. Some part of the network is going to have intermittent fluctuations and failures, which will, cause some badness in the system. You don't need Monzo Stand In for that. The system is distributed, it's resilient, and typically when individual components have issues, the rest of the system is resilient to those failures, will step in and continue to service the customer. So the customer won't even notice that, a drive in a server has just been replaced, for example. That's what the primary platform does. So then you have to think about, well, how does this go drastically wrong? And at a high level, it's probably 2 potential root causes, and they're both obviously extremely unlikely, but they are plausible. So you want to protect against that if you want to have a high level of resilience. One is that your cloud provider has a serious technical issue that's affecting multiple data centers in multiple locations, as an example. The second likely root cause is if we make a change in the system that causes all sorts of error conditions, which are difficult to roll back, for example, like hypothetical examples of how things could go very wrong where your normal good operational resilience isn't enough. So we thought, well, how could we fix that? And, and the team went away and, and came back with the idea for Monzo Stand In, which is basically, well, let's take both of those things out of the equation. So let's build something that runs with a different cloud provider. And let's also build something that is a completely independent code base. So what we actually did, we built another system for Monzo that can fully operate all of our important business services. And we essentially wrote that from scratch. So what that means is that if we detect or we believe that we're at risk of an important business service such as payments becoming unavailable to customers, we can switch that over to Monzo Stand In, either a single service or all of our important business services, should we need to.
Wow.
And in fact, the platform is designed to take 100% of our payments traffic at effectively zero notice.
So it can scale all the way up to that volume.
Yeah,
Wow.
and we can, and of course, then we can switch back and reconcile when the incident is over. So that's the intent.
Wow.
Of Monzo Stand In.
Wow. Have you ever had to use it?
Yes, we have actually. So because we can enable it for certain services, or in the worst case, for every important business service. We've had a few cases where we've, I would say, preventively enabled it for payments, and then just roll it back.
Fantastic.
And nobody actually noticed that we did so.
Yeah.
We did have a customer visible incident, I believe it was August 24, where we actually did experience what we call a major platform incident. It lasted about an hour, but minutes in, we flipped to Monzo Stand In. So I think it was, on minute 8, all impact for customers in terms of payment hit ceased.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So so once tried in, once tried for real.
Yeah.
So this system has really interesting properties. There are many other ways in which you can run a backup system in parallel that you can fail over to, etc.
And I'm sure lots of banks have that, right?
Yes, but typically what happens, this is something that's essentially sitting, and collecting dust somewhere, and maybe you take it out once a year and you do a fire drill, and then when you have to use it, you're not sure if it actually works, is it up to date, etc. The way we've solved this problem is we actually run Monzo Stand In all the time. So we take a small proportion of traffic to our primary platform, and we service those requests across both platforms and then compare the results.
Got it.
So that when one of our engineers is responding to an incident, if they feel that they need to enable Monzo Stand In, they can do this safely and immediately because it has been running all this time and it has been automatically validating that it's correct, which is obviously a massive advantage for us. The other thing, obviously, this is, we do these things because we want to provide a high quality of service that's continuous. But cost is also important because, it's in the interest of our customers for us to be cost effective. And Monzo Stand In actually does not cost a lot of money to run because most of the time it's only serving a small proportion of traffic and it only actually comes into play when we have to use it and then scales back down. So it's, I think it's an excellent way to tackle this problem.
So, Matej, so let's talk about customer expectations and how they've been changing. So we've been talking a little bit about the kind of uptime, maybe expectations that people have. But what are you hearing from customers and their kind of expectations?
I mean, absolutely, customer expectations have changed. In fact, I would say that Monzo and companies like Monzo have had a big hand to play in that. Just to give you some examples, before digital banks existed, it was completely acceptable for you to get a notification about your payment, later in the day or a day later. Now, instant notification is absolutely table stakes. Before Monzo launched Gambling Block, customers didn't have tools to prevent them from making gambling payments. And now most banks are offering something like that. I could keep going. We recently launched call status that help protect customers from fraud that now many other banks are picking up. So absolutely, I think technical innovation is changing customers' expectations higher for the better. And I think it's actually great that the industry is following because that means more customers get a better experience.
Yeah. So to your point about customer expectations, one of the things that customers, I guess, have gotten used to so much over the years is planned downtime or outages. I mean, I've been caught out with this. I'll get a text message from the bank that I forget about, and then, I'll go and try and make some transactions, and then I'll be like, oh my God, the bank is down, it's down. And how could this even be? And so now with services like what you're launching, that completely reframes it, and customers no longer have that as a default expectation.
Absolutely. At Monzo, we have no planned outages. We deploy our changes on a continuous basis all the time without taking the systems down. If you look around, when's the last time, you saw Google announce a planned outage, or Amazon or Apple, or Netflix? It just doesn't happen. You have to be able to deploy these changes on a continuous basis. It's also, this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, but it's actually better for operational resilience if you do that. So typically what happens, let's say you're a company and you do, say, quarterly releases, right? So in one step, you're going to be deploying potentially hundreds of thousands of changes which have accumulated. And that makes for one very complicated change.
Yeah.
And if that change goes wrong, it's very hard to figure out which bits went wrong. It's also very hard to roll back. Whereas if you operate on a continuous delivery basis, where you deploy things all the time, then every change that you deploy is individually simple. It's easy to measure and reason about, and it's also easy to roll back.
Got it.
So we think this approach is inherently safer. And it's also faster.
It's amazing. The risk of each release is ever so slightly smaller. And how does a customer see that? I guess, does that permutate back into app releases on the App Store, for example? Are you doing that more often, or is that a completely different thing?
Obviously, with app releases, you can't ship a new app release hundreds of times a day.
Yeah.
So we would deploy changes across our backend systems hundreds of times every day. We launch or deploy a new version of the app daily for those who want to take daily versions. Every customer of Monzo gets a new version every week.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm very interested to know about, the feedback that you've gotten from the industry and the world after you put this out. I mean, Monzo is very well known for transparency and, talking about everything that you've done. What have you heard from the industry back?
And customers, actually.
And customers,
yeah. I mentioned that. We run Monzo Stand In all the time to make sure that it works. This includes the app of Monzo Stand In. So every day, a small number of customers of Monzo are asked to spend their day in the Monzo Stand In app. Fantastic. To help us ensure that it works. So I actually get some good feedback from customers as well, which is really good to see. In terms of industry, we've had quite a lot of questions come in from different companies after we posted the blog. We believe it's certainly a very good approach to improve operational resilience.
Yep.
And Monzo has a culture of transparency, and we've never kept things like this hidden. We don't treat this as some magic sauce that we have to lock away somewhere. So our intention is to continue to be very transparent and to share our learnings in how we combat cybersecurity threats, in how we improve operational resilience. That is something that we're going to do forever as a company.
Yeah. And is it as a framework? Is it something that you can almost offer, to the industry as a whole? Is there a kind of like a white paper approach that you can take, which says, hey, this is how we did it,
I think this is the path that we're on right now, that we share what we learn in the hope that others will find it useful. We've had people come, write to us and ask questions. We had lots of follow-up conversations. There's certainly a number of companies out there considering similar approaches now, and I think that's great because that means more customers will receive a better service eventually.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk a little bit about like how you develop this from idea into implementation. So you talked a little bit about the speed of the pace that you guys are able to run at, but there's also quite a lot there about culture and about how you prioritize things that makes, I think, Monzo different from a lot of other banks out there. I mean, how would you say in the engineering teams, the culture is different from some of the other people out there?
Well, I've never seen the inside of another bank, so it's hard for me to compare. But one of the reasons I joined Monzo is because of Monzo's world-class engineering. And it is world-class, hands down.
Right.
So, the way Standin came about was essentially us framing, an ambitious challenge, and the team taking that, running with it, and coming back with a lot of very interesting options, and eventually zeroing in on this approach that we've taken. And we take the same approach, focus on the customer, technical excellence. That's the approach that we take in everything that we do.
And I'm guessing that permeates also into other parts of Monzo as well, because, there's compliance, there's all the regulatory side to it as well that needs to come on board with you. to do that. So it's all of these components, because that's one of the big things you hear in big banks that they really, really, really struggle with is siloed organizations, is varying different priority. But it sounds like you guys have managed to just get that involved.
We don't think in terms of, engineering being different from or separate from compliance or security or anything like that. We have deeply cross-functional teams. Everybody's chasing the same outcomes, and those are outcomes for our customers. And we have found that is the better approach. And the evidence is that the approach is working. We're a successful business. In the last year alone, we had 2 million people in the UK join Monzo. We get great feedback from customers. So we're going to continue with this.
That's so cool. It's incredible stats. And just to close, is there one piece of advice that you can share with other tech leaders or anybody in the engineering world listening?
That's a good question.
From Standin, some of the learnings that you've had maybe in the last.
I think out of everything, the most important thing is speed of iteration. It is how fast you can learn from what you're doing. You run experiment, you ship a feature, you deploy a change. How well can you measure it? And how quickly can you learn from that change and what you can do to improve upon it? And I think the quicker that cycle is, the more you're going to get done. And that's true in operational resilience as in everything else that you want to do.
Yeah, and I have the culture that backs it up, that motivates people to work at that kind of pace and excellence. Amazing. Well, thank you so much. That wraps up today's discussion, and a big thank you to Matej for giving us a glimpse into the world behind the scenes. Thank you so much for joining me. And where can people connect and find out more about you?
It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you again for having me. Please come and read our engineering blog. And if you like what you see, and if you're looking for a job, get in touch because we are hiring.
Awesome. And you can find me on LinkedIn. And thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, follow our podcast and don't forget to leave us a review. It helps us to make it better and helps others find the show. As always, if you want to join the conversation, find us on social media. Just search for 11FS or Fintech Insider, or email podcasts@11fs.com. Thanks very much and goodbye.
Cybersecurity is the top concern for UK businesses, according to Vanta's recent State of Trust report. But whether you're a startup founder or an experienced security professional, Vanta is here to help. Businesses use Vanta to establish trust by automating compliance needs across over 35 frameworks like ISO 27001 and SOC 2, centralize security workflows, complete security questionnaires up to 5 times faster, and proactively manage vendor risk. Join over 9,000 global companies like Flow Health, Synthesia, and Alika Bank who use Vanta to manage risk and prove security in real time. For a limited time, get $1,000 off Vanta at vanta.com/insider. That's VANTA.com/insider for $1,000 off.